Welcome to the Darkstream, Vox Day, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. So thanks for tuning in. We are on Darkstream number 1071. Audio is good, video is good. Folks are on the UATV chat, they're on the DLive chat, and we are rolling. So, I coined a new word today, and when I do this, or the reason that I do this is not because I'm, as one individual suggests on Social Galactic today, in order to draw people to the blog or anything like that. In fact, it doesn't work that way in the slightest, because whenever a term or idea becomes broadly adopted enough, you immediately have a lot of different folks attempting to redefine it, not necessarily take credit for it. You don't really see a lot of that, but there's often this muddying of the water. We've seen that with, for example, with the term Sigma male. There's Sigma male stuff all over the place. We've even seen it with Gamma male. For whatever reason, people like to take terms and attempt to redefine them in a way that makes themselves look good, makes themselves look better. It's also a bit ironic that I've been accused of developing the concept of the Sigma male in order to suit myself and make myself look better, or give myself a higher status in the hierarchy, which of course is complete nonsense, because the whole reason it was necessary to develop the Sigma is to explain to people that I'm not an alpha, I don't behave like an alpha, and so please stop confusing me with one just because I happen to be popular with the opposite sex, and so, it was actually it's a definite downgrade. It's not an upgrade. So anyhow, I don't think that that's going to happen with this new term. And the reason that I thought that it was necessary to develop a new term was because there simply isn't any word that adequately describes the concept of a persistent failure with women on the part of men. I mean, this is a very common thing. I would say that, while every single guy that I know has failed with women at some point in time, there's a significant percentage, maybe even a majority, for whom that is the persistent state. They don't just fail with women, they persistently fail with women. And in most cases, not just because they're disqualified from the intersexual market on the basis of being particularly ugly, particularly stupid, particularly disabled. I'm talking about your run-of-the-mill normal guys who, for whatever reason, persistently fail with women. And by fail with women, I mean that in a very broad context. I mean, it's about whether the particular interaction, regardless of what it might be, in most cases, most interactions with women are not in a sexual context. They're just in a quotidian context. It might be just enacting a transaction. For example, today I didn't have to. I was at the pharmacy picking up some stuff, like, contact lens solution. And it occurred to me, hey, I think I could use some, additional medication that I've got a prescription for. So I asked for it, and the lady said, I'm sorry, you can't because it expired 6 months ago. And so, without a great deal of effort, we ended up with her granting me an additional 6-month extension to my prescription, and then gave me the stuff that I was looking for. It wasn't important, but that's what I mean by a successful outcome interacting with a woman. It can range from that to successfully proposing to a woman that you want to marry, right? But for some reason, it's very, very difficult for a lot of men. Some of them can barely talk to women. Others can't do so without creeping them out, right? So anyhow, and here's the other thing, is that a lot of times that men who are unsuccessful with women, unable to communicate with women, are accused wrongly and falsely of hating or disliking them. They may get bitter about their lack of success. The lack of their success may even make them angry, but they are not misogynists. A genuine misogynist does not crave conversation with women, does not crave spending time with a woman. So, I think that it's important to distinguish between the two. Raging Zoomer says, most guys have a fear of failure and never even try at approaching a girl. There's that too. There's a myriad of reasons for what I have coined Zifogyny, which comes from the Greek word zyphos, failure, and obviously gyne referring to women. It's much the same. It's the same coinage as misogyny. Miso is Greek for hate. But the reason that the concept, as opposed to the coinage itself, but the reason that the concept of zyphogeny is important is because until you can correctly label something and identify something, you cannot understand it. It's difficult to talk about something. It's difficult to talk about a concrete subject if you don't have a name for it, even if it's just a private name in your head. I have an entire vocabulary that I don't share with anybody because it doesn't make sense. I think I've mentioned before how I was having a conversation with someone who didn't understand when I was explaining something to them, and I was distinguishing between rhetoric and rhetoric, and it actually made sense. I mean, I was able to explain it to him why I did that for myself, even though it was a totally useless term for anybody else. And it's also possible that zyphogeny is going to be totally useless to anyone else. I'm not saying, oh, you should use this term. I'm just saying that I happen to have coined it. I utilize it in my own thinking. Perhaps it will appear in my writing when I write the SSH book. But remember, it's not the words that matter. Words are just titles. They're just labels. It's the concepts that they refer to. If you can grasp the concept as its own entity, it doesn't matter what the word actually is. Raging Zoomer said, it's also hard not to be initially disliked by young women nowadays when you're an anti-feminist and maybe a bit of a chauvinist as well. Actually, Raging Zoomer, that's part of what we're going to get into here. And that's a misconception on your part. Or at least the tone that you have is that that's somehow negative. It's not negative. And so he said, many girls who ended up liking me over time who I've been attracted to dislike me at first. Yes, that's normal. That's the whole point. It's not a negative. People don't, attraction, it has its own logic and it's not linear. Any guy who has had any success with the opposite sex at all will tell you it is far, far better to be hated than to be ignored. If a woman hates you, you're already like 65% of the way there. Because and this gets back to the other part of the title. Female solipsism, male zyphogeny. And what female solipsism means is that you can't, a woman has a fundamentally different perspective than a man. Now, I understand that this probably sounds obvious. And yet, how many of you who think it sounds obvious repeatedly, continuously, reliably assume that a woman is going to think and do something similar to what you would think and do in the same situation? They don't. They won't. It's a fundamentally different perspective. It's a fundamentally different mindset. It's not necessarily one that you can accurately or correctly simulate or utilize. I'm going to read you a little bit of what I posted earlier today. And this was on the blog. And it's written by a woman whose name you absolutely know, Florence Nightingale. So, we're talking about someone who is famously one of the most sympathetic, outward-focused individuals in the history of the human race. Not only that, but she was a highly intelligent, highly educated woman. She actually invented the pie chart. She was far more adept at statistics than most men and women today. And this is what she wrote in a piece. She wrote copiously, even though it's not, her books are not necessarily published and recognized. But it says, women aren't capable of love. And this is she's referring to her sister here when she refers to Parthe. In one sense, I do believe I am like a man, as Parthe says. But how? In having sympathy. Women crave for being loved, not for loving. They scream out at you for sympathy all day long. They are incapable of giving any in return, for they cannot state a fact accurately to another, nor can that other woman attend to it accurately enough for it to become information. Now, is not all this the result of want of sympathy? I'm sick with indignation at what wives and mothers will do of the most shocking selfishness. And people call it all maternal or conjugal affection and think it pretty to say so. No, let each person tell the truth from their own experience. They really don't have sympathy or the ability to empathize because they are always judging everyone and everything as a product on a social value scale that relates to their own egos and bounces off of themselves. There is no capability for genuine feeling. This is what I've experienced with women. There is no capable for genuine feeling for other humans, or really in general, except when those feelings are for themselves and the other people are just proxies to bounce ideas off of. Now, this is something that you see all the time. One thing that I find very, very valuable is to sit in a coffee shop and listen to the conversations that surround me. Real conversations are very, very different than they're portrayed in the movies or than they're portrayed in books. And, I put in The World in Shadow that there's a awkward, strange conversation that reads very weirdly. And I put it in mostly because I couldn't believe what I was hearing at the time. I just started typing in what this young guy and this young girl were saying to each other. It was like, I like your pants. That was what started it, and it was just I just included a short bit, but it was just very, very odd. Didn't follow, and it was the first conversation that made me fully understand the artificiality of the way conversation is portrayed in the arts. And so when you look at the way that normal conversations are portrayed, it's question, answer, monologue, segue to highly related dialogue. But the truth is that the main way that people in general and women in particular talk, it takes two different forms. Number one is what I think of as wait to talk. So, when you're seeing actually there's three major forms. One is wait to talk. So that means that if you've got one girl who works at a yogurt stand and another girl who works at a fashion shop, the first girl will talk about stuff that was going on at the yogurt shop, and when she takes a breath or when she says something, and this relates to the second thing, the other person will jump in and start talking in a completely unrelated manner. If you listen to the first piece of the dialogue and then you look at the second piece of the dialogue, they're completely unrelated. And what can be mildly amusing at times is the way that if the if the microphone is being equitably distributed, you'll hear, they're talking about the one, they're talking about the other, and they're just two completely different, totally unrelated conversations. Now, where they can relate a little bit, or they can appear to relate a little bit, is the second phenomenon. And that's what I call triggering. So what's happening is that instead of simply waiting for the opportunity to talk, it is the triggering on a certain word, a certain name. And so what they'll do is they'll use that trigger as an opportunity to pivot to whatever their topic is. And it can be actually kind of amusing sometimes, especially if you've got strong personalities that are kind of competing for the microphone, the way that they'll use the same trigger to go back and forth across topics, across subjects. And then the third one is a third one that talks about people. So, and it follows the form of name a person and express your opinion about that person. Boom, 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 boom. And so, it's mildly, that's actually a less interesting form of conversation, in my opinion. Just because it's the same thing, it's literally the same thing over and over again. Oh, this person. And it's usually about how that person reacted to the speaker. Yeah. No, it's not actually what people think. It's Bargain Bear says, "Oh my gosh, can you believe what Kathy did? Oh, haven't you heard?" No, it's not really that. I'm not talking about gossip. What it's more akin to, someone will say, "Oh, I ran into Tommy today," and the other person will say, "Oh, Tommy, he's so nice. He saw me. I ran into him on Saturday, and he said that he really liked my dress. Isn't that nice?" And then you move on to the next person. Repeat as desired. It's not. I'm not saying that there isn't any gossip. I'm saying that the gossip is actually a much smaller percentage of the conversation, because gossip is not solipsistic. Solipsism means that the person essentially doesn't really pay attention to anything else that doesn't relate to them. If it doesn't have a direct relation to them, it doesn't really exist, and it's really not much interest. That's what Florence Nightingale was talking about. She was specifically referring, in this case, it says that's what she means by sympathy. They don't have sympathy or the ability to empathize. Because to empathize means the ability of putting yourself into the other person's shoes, seeing things from the other person's perspective. For those who are solipsistic, it's a form of self-absorption that the non-solipsistic find very, very difficult to understand. You know, it's different than narcissism. You know, in the case of narcissism, you're not interested in what other people are doing. You're not interested in other people. But that doesn't mean that you don't have the capacity to put yourself in someone else's shoes. You know, I mean, as it happens, you know, at least, probably you can probably observe this, but you know, with the various personality tests and stuff, you know, I test out as narcissistic and Machiavellian, but I'm not what they call dark triad because I'm actually highly empathetic. Ironically, apparently, my psychology would make me a optimal Chinese torturer. what the Chinese used to call the torturer that weeps, and that was generally considered to be the very worst sort, because if the torturer could empathize with you, then he would know what make the cause the most pain. So you know, if this whole book thing doesn't work out, then you know, at least I suppose I could look for a job in that field. Berserker Bear said, Vox, do you think this aspect of people was magnified through and after COVID? No, I don't think so. I definitely don't think so. You know, it's I think that it made I think it made things more clear to people. I think it was harder for people to deny what they were seeing, but it didn't magnify it at all. Because, I mean, this is old stuff. I mean, we may have a better understanding of it. We may have better labels for these things. But all of these patterns, all of these behaviors are age old. They're human nature. They haven't changed. But Big Bear says, truth is the exact opposite of the narrative I grew up being taught about women. Oh yeah, you're taught that women are more sympathetic. They have more feelings for others. But it's not true at all. P.O. Bear sends a super chat. Thank you. He says, any news on getting UATV back on Roku? Well, we actually hired, I mean, this is why I don't like to hire people. We hired some people to do dedicated apps, but you know, there's stuff that they can't do without our direct people, and so it's just been basically in limbo for a while. You know, we'll see. Hopefully they'll get this. Hopefully they'll get all this stuff worked out. But you know, I'm not holding my breath. I don't have time to. You know, once we've hired somebody or we've assigned some volunteers or whatever, I don't really tend to think about it much. Either they deliver or they don't. You know, either it gets done or it doesn't. And you know, we'll revisit eventually if we need to. But there's no point. It'd be ridiculous to start with a different approach. So hopefully the internal devs and the external devs will be able to, you know, get all the necessary, you know, things together and so forth. We'll see how it goes. Exterminator Bear says, I noticed not enough teaching exists in how to be successful with women. It's all trial and error, and you succeed or fail. no instruction. Well, I don't think that's correct. I mean, the pickup artists have done a tremendous job in studying, publishing. It's a huge mistake to dismiss the work that these guys have done just because they happen to be a bunch of, immoral hedonists who are utilizing their knowledge for their own hedonistic purposes. You don't need to do anything that they do to extract the truth from what they're observing. Raging Zoomer says, even nice women are quick to entirely write people off for the mortal sin of being not nice. Yeah. Why shouldn't men who are hated by women hate them in return? Because it's self-defeating. What good does it do you to hate women? How does it improve your life at all? I mean, you can say quite clearly, while zyphogeny may lead to misogyny, misogyny definitely leads to zyfogyny. There's no question about that. Exterminator Bear says, fathers don't teach their sons about how, at least mine didn't. No, I mean, well, the problem is that very, very few men have any understanding of this. And most men who do have an instinctive understanding don't know what they do or know why they do what they do. It's like asking Magic Johnson, how do you know to make that pass there? He has no idea. It's instinctive. It's natural. When you've your average alpha, who's 6'3", handsome, developed early, is a social success. He has no idea what he did right. So his advice is often the classic, well, just be yourself. Well, be yourself is great if you're naturally great. I totally disagree. Inquisitor Bear says 99% of inability to talk to women is a direct result of autoeroticism. No, that's I've only ever heard that. Just no offense, but I've only ever heard that from low deltas and gammas. I mean, as a general rule, the more, a lot of the alphas, are actually tend to be oversexed. Much more so than it doesn't have anything to do with it. The inability to talk to women is mostly a combination of low social status and fear. Most of and it's easy to see and it's easy to prove. How many of those guys who are unable to talk to women are able to talk to high status men? They're not. Exterminator Bear points out, my dad was a natural athlete and should have had a Major League Baseball career, except he was injured. We are vastly different people. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Ladumba says, if I remember correctly, Trump said that he just can't control himself when he sees a beautiful woman. He just approaches them and they give in. Yeah, that's that's what alphas do. I mean, I've told you the story before about Bill Clinton. He was walking down a golf course past a housing development that was built right along the golf course. And there was a well-endowed middle-aged woman who lived there and just happened to be watching the golfers go by. I'm sure word that the president was golfing had gotten out. And according to someone who was there, Clinton spotted this woman who was wearing a Mickey Mouse sweater. And of course, he couldn't resist going over to say hello to her, being obviously a fairly typical oversexed alpha. And and this is where the alpha charm comes in. Apparently, he said to her, "Mickey needs a hug," and gave her a hug. I mean, the man may have been a terrible, terrible president, and he was obviously an out-of-control horn dog. But what a lot of people didn't want to admit is that the guy had charm. Trump has charm. And this is an instinctive, natural thing. The main reason, in my opinion, that men are zyphogynistic is because they keep thinking in their heads that women are going to behave like they do, are going to react like they do. And because that doesn't happen, because that doesn't work, they're always off on a wrong foot. One reason why I never get in trouble ever with, misunderstandings or young women thinking I'm creepy or anything like that is that I treat all women other than my family and a few close friends, as I treat them with total lack of interest. Now, that's pretty, I'm not very interested in other people in the first place, so this is quite easy for me, right? But even, in the instances when, there's a beautiful international model who's staying at our house or something, and there's that natural instinctive male urge to perform, put on a show, be charming, try to talk to them, etc. I just clamp it down and don't engage other than what is socially necessary. And that completely eliminates any even potential difficulty in talking to the person in any way, shape, or form. And of course, the ironic thing is that